what we want to talk about is this condensation, damp and mould strategy developed for Peabody at Thamesmead in southeast London. It's an award-winning strategy. We think it's a bit groundbreaking, so we're quite proud of it, but that's for you to assess, I guess, really. So my job to start things off is to talk a little bit about Thamesmead and why it became a condensation, damp and mould problem and how we approached the issue of dealing with it. Condensation, damp and mould is something that frequently the social housing industry in the past has dealt with by sticking a fan in. You've got a flat with condensation, damp and mould, stick in a fan and it'll be all right. And it never works. So we decided to do something that was more systematic, more evidence-based, and a little bit more kind of serious to try and get to the grips with the problem and try and build a project that would be a model for other housing organisations to use. So Thamesmead is a good example. Those of you who've seen A Clockwork Orange might remember it as the set where the film was set. It was built by the GLC in the 1970s. There's lots of this stuff at top right, reinforced concrete frame construction with precast reinforced concrete panels, a mixture of high-rise tower blocks and deck access blocks, 6 or 8 stories high. And what happened was that it started out with a district heating system when it was built, and a previous landlord before Peabody arrived took out the district heating system and couldn't afford to replace it and put individual gas central heating in every flat. There are something like 2,500 flats on the estate. It's a very big estate. And just at that point, the fuel prices all went up in the early 2000s, and suddenly Thamesmead was completely hit by fuel poverty. And as a result, people were underheating, underventilating, and condensation occurred. Damp and mould started to be very common. And in fact, when I first was invited by Peabody to go and look at the place, it was the worst mould I had seen in 30 years in the business of being an energy consultant in housing. So we had significant condensation, damp and mould. At least the stock condition survey revealed that at least 18% of the homes had damp and mould, and there were 3,000 condensation, damp and mould or CDM related repairs logged in by Peabody in 2015-2016, affecting 1,900 homes. And one of the solutions being used at that time was just to wash the mould, apply a mould wash, and that was costing £1,275 per home, and it had to be repeated every couple of years to make it effective. So it wasn't really a solution. We were treating the symptoms rather than the causes. The good side of the story is that Crossrail terminates at Abbey Wood, which is in Thamesmead, and suddenly the area was getting gentrified, increasing land values and real opportunity for investment. So Peabody has a pretty extensive, substantial regeneration program, investment program for Thamesmead, and that includes environmental improvements, knocking some homes down, building some new ones, and comprehensive refurbishment. But the ones that you see in blue there, some homes won't get replaced or refurbished for several years. And it was generally felt by our team that you couldn't leave people in mouldy homes while we get round to improving them or replacing them. We had to do something about the mould right away. So the brief for this project was sort out the mould. So we developed the CDM strategy with a focus on homes that will not be replaced or improved over the short or medium term, that might be waiting for 15 or more years. Our objectives were to initially manage the condensation and mould. We like to think we can eliminate it, and we have done so in fact, and to mitigate fuel poverty in order to help to start to relieve the causes. The original budget was £2 million. We've actually spent a little bit more than that, I think, and the programme was 3 years, between 2016 and this year, with an early pilot, and we're currently finishing the evaluation of the whole project. The key points of the strategy are really that we risk assessed the stock. This is the bit I most enjoyed, really. We looked at the condition of the stock using SAP and EPC data, occupancy information and so on, without necessarily going there. We did use the stock condition survey data, which is a sample, and we did do some very detailed surveys to validate our risk assessments, but essentially we assessed the risk of there being mould in all the homes on the estate. And that was done with data that was already in Peabody. And we scored the risks and then converted the scores into high, medium or low risks of CDM, and that allowed us to target measures according to the risk level, which, given a limited amount of resource, was a critical factor in the process. On the top right, you can see the, I know you can't read it, but that's one of our risk assessment tables. Every dwelling gets graded high, medium or low. And then on the bottom right, we did some detailed surveys of some of the high and medium risk homes, mostly to validate the risk assessment, to make sure that it was actually predicting where the mould was. And in fact, it proved to be very effective. The risk assessment, if the risk assessment told you there was a high risk of mould, you could go there and knock on the door. They opened the door and there's mould everywhere. If it said there was a low risk of mould, they opened the door and it was clean. So we were very confident that the risk assessment worked really well, and we validated it with these surveys. You can't see it again, of course, but what's happening here is that in the blue zone, that's by dwelling and by room, recording whether there is condensation or mould in every single space in the dwelling. And in the green zone, it's recording every single piece of ventilation equipment, including trickle vents, fans, more sophisticated systems, and so on. So we're getting a really good picture. And one of the things the validation surveys showed us was that, if you came up and had a look, you could see that the evidence is there, that intermittent ventilation in social housing does not fix mould, because we found plenty of dwellings with intermittent ventilation systems where the mould was quite extensive. So we knew that we had to move to continuous ventilation in order to solve the problem. So the CDM strategy has 3 levels of intervention. The first is for low-risk homes. They all get energy advice, including ventilation advice. And they get a complete, comprehensive energy advice visit, and Nadira's going to tell you about that next, so I'll leave that bit to her. And that's all those homes get, because they don't have any other problem as far as we know. We do add to the medium and high-risk homes households who self-report that they've got mould problems, which sometimes get a bit missed by the risk assessment. But in general, low-risk homes are relatively clean, and we give them the advice to help them keep them clean and to ensure that the behaviour and the heating and ventilation patterns are appropriate. For medium-risk homes, we also give the energy advice, but we also do a little bit of boiler replacement where necessary to give them a more efficient boiler to reduce their heating costs, making it more appropriate for them to heat better, more easy for them to heat better, where necessary and affordable. We haven't done much insulation. One of the issues with Thamesmead was that the construction makes it really difficult to insulate without spending lots of money. So one of the key points about this strategy is we tried to get rid of the condensation, damp and mould without doing any insulation. We did a very small amount where we found empty cavities, but in general this precast concrete construction was only really susceptible to external insulation of various kinds. Very difficult to do in that kind of built form, and way too expensive for us really, even with the £2 million budget. So we stayed away from insulation, but we also gave the medium risk homes a smart heating controller called a switchy. And the smart heating controller has a number of advantages. Besides saving the tenants money, enabling them to heat at a lower cost, it also allows us to see what's going on in the home, because it monitors the internal temperature, the RH, the use of the heating system, the occupancy of the dwelling, and supplies that through the mobile phone network to Switchy's website. So we can then have a dashboard, which I'm sure Adam will show you, which allows us to see what's going on in the homes. And that was hugely important for us to be able to see what the effects of what we were doing in the homes might be. And then the high-risk homes, the ones with lots of mould, they got mould washes, of course. We got rid of the mould, but they also got the energy and ventilation advice. They also got the switchy smart heating controller and heating improvements. And then we delivered into each of those homes an Air-Eco demand-controlled centralised MEV system. And it's a terrifically important feature of the strategy, because it allowed us to put additional ventilation capacity over and above what the building regs would ask for into the homes, and then we use the demand control to make that overcapacity ventilation system energy efficient. So it allows us to be in a situation where every room in every one of the homes we treated has got plenty of ventilation capacity available, but we only deliver it when and where it's needed. And that became a key feature of this strategy throughout the thing.